Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We sure do appreciate it. It's Sean from SGT Report, and on the line, my contributors and good friends, Rory and Peter. Gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. And also on the line, Jan Skoyles from the Real Asset Company. And Jan, we just interviewed a couple weeks back, and boy, is she entertaining. Also on the line is her friend, Koos Jansen. Koos Jansen and Jan are working on a collaborative project called Uncovering China's Rush for Gold, and you can find Koos's work over at koosjansenblogspot.com. Jan, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Very good to be back.
Well, very good to have you back. I think the last time we spoke with you just a few weeks ago, that interview has already been listened to by 14 or 15,000 people, and they all seem to like you quite a bit.
Well, good. I like them very much as well then. So.
Kind comments are, of course, always welcome below this video and others. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys met and how you know each other?
Go on,
Yeah,
Keith.
sure.
Tell them your own story.
Shall I tell them? Yeah. No, I was just, I'm an independent thinker, and I have my own blog, but we met through Twitter, and yeah, we were both interested in the China story, and I was doing a lot of research on it, and then we decided to do a collaboration on China. So it's a multiple part of, I think it will be 6 or 7 parts on China, and it's it's nice to do it together. I think we get a bigger audience this way.
And when you mention your own website, Koos, I just want people to know that's koosjansenblogspot.com, KOOSJANSEN, blogspot.com. And we've been posting your material. Actually, going back to September 19th, 2013, you wrote a piece called Shanghai Gold Exchange, Physical Delivery Equals Chinese Demand, which I think may have inspired your partnering with Jan on an article called Uncovering China's Rush for Gold. Now, I have so many questions. I know Rory and Peter do too. Where do you guys want to begin? Peter, why don't we let you kick off with a question?
Yeah, sure. You've been talking about all the gold pouring into China, and I'm curious to see how the two of you see China putting that gold to use. And I see 2 possible situations. Do you see them eventually backing the yuan with gold, or do you see gold serving as currency itself? And what sort of time frame are we talking about them possibly putting this gold to use?
Well, I think they don't want to back the yuan with gold because at this point a fixed parity won't be really good for their position. What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I agree with Keith, and I think there's a lot more to be done before they're even contemplating anything to do with their currency or the role that their currency is playing on the international market. I think first and foremost, it's as I was saying in another interview the other day, it's about sort of preparing the ground and getting people to own gold. It's about just protecting themselves from sort of the US, debt instruments that they're part of. And I think it's about, there's another article that went up on Koos's website the other day about kind of their role in the international gold market and the influence that they could have over the price. I think that's definitely the sort of target in the short to medium term. And I agree with Koos, there's issues over parity. There's a lot more to be done in terms of their approach to the international market, the trading that's going on, their relationship with other currencies. And I think if they were going to be doing anything with their currency, it would be to just sort of maybe like an international basket as a reserve currency, maybe for gold to have a role with that along with their own currency. But I certainly don't see them stepping up to a gold standard situation.
Let me ask you guys this. Is China now the world's biggest economy, or is the United States still technically in the #1 position?
I think the US still.
Yeah, the United States is the #1 economy, and China is second now.
Okay. Because I think it's interesting that China, according to your article, has classified gold, quote, as a strategic asset. When we hear men like Ben Bernanke not exactly being able to put the definition on gold or its purpose when he's asked by Ron Paul to define gold or why people would want to hold gold, I find it very interesting that he can't say it's a strategic asset. He couldn't even bring himself to say that. Let's talk a little bit about the significance of China, the second largest economy on the planet, being actively involved in securing thousands of tons of gold for its reserves. What is the significance in your mind of the Shanghai Gold Exchange? I know, Koos, that you wrote back in your article, Shanghai Gold Exchange, Physical Delivery Equals Chinese Demand.
Yes.
You wrote that their year-to-date, back then, at least in September, year-to-date physical delivery on the Shanghai Gold Exchange stood at 1,546 tons. What is the significance of the Shanghai Gold Exchange? Because we know that the COMEX is corrupt. We know that the LBMA is corrupt. There's issues in these Western-controlled exchanges. What is the significance of the Shanghai Gold Exchange in your mind?
Well, the significance is that the majority of trade, or not the majority, but quite large percentage, about 20% of their trade volume is physical delivered. So that's all, you know. I mean, it's a lot of physical gold going through that exchange. And the Chinese gold market is such constructed that by the People Bank of China, that all gold import and mining supply has to go through the SGE. So it's not just a lot of activity. We know exactly, just like I wrote in my article, we know exactly what supply is, what demand is by these SGE deliveries. So it's really important, and there's a lot of physical gold going through the exchange. Year to date is 1,660 tons. So yeah, that's a lot.
I think the key thing here is what's significant about it. This is a reflection of real gold demand. This is the real gold market. You know, we talked about this before in my last interview. We're seeing this, you know, extreme change in the nature of gold demand and how we're measuring gold demand. And, you know, even now you see the mainstream media talking about what's happening on COMEX, and then they talk about what's happening on the SGE. So we're talking about paper gold demand and physical gold demand. And whilst, okay, we've always talked about India and how much demand's going through there, actually the SGE is such a specific way of looking at it. It's so phenomenal what we're seeing, and so this is such a good reflection of this real gold market and what, you know, what's happening with physical gold demand. And it's not just like COMEX used by sort of institutions. SGE is used by individuals and institutions alike, so it really is just showing this broad spectrum of what's happening in the gold market. And again, you know, like I was reading an academic paper today about when gold's used as a safe haven. Well, they'd only talked about this in relation to futures markets, mainly COMEX, and they were saying gold only works as a safe haven in short periods. Well, that's fine. That is true if you're buying futures and you don't actually want to take delivery of that gold because there isn't any gold backing it anyway. But, of course, we all know that the Chinese are buying gold because it's a safe haven in the long run, and that's what they're doing. And that's, again, when we come back to owning so many US bonds.
Yeah, and guys, Jan and Koos's collaborative research into the Chinese gold market, the article they've written together is called Uncovering China's Rush for Gold. We posted it at SGT Report, so you're going to want to search for that and read it. It's a gripping read. Let me ask you guys this. Now, on Friday in the gold and silver market, once again, Jan, and this ties back to our last conversation in which we talked about manipulation in the paper market. Gold and silver was smashed again on Friday, and Zero Hedge was reporting that 2 million ounces were sold by a single buyer. Our friend Bix Weir says it was J.P. Morgan dumping 25% of their paper gold holdings. What's your take on the smash again that we saw on Friday?
Well, the same take that I always have, in that, you know, first of all, my first response is thanks guys, let's just buy up some more then if you're going to smash the price. And my second response is, well, how much longer can they keep playing this game before, you know, when the markets aren't going to stand for it anymore? You know, obviously I don't know the reasons behind doing it. There obviously was, you know, it is clearly manipulation. And I think what's happening in the US, what with the, you know, we talked about this before, this kind of three-pronged issue of the shutdown, the debt ceiling and tapering. Gold is clearly going to become more attractive. Like we've all just been talking about, physical gold demand's picking up, demand's still strong in the US Mint. And I think, you know, there's obviously going to be this takedown to try and keep the dollar looking pretty and make gold look less attractive. But I don't really have anything new to say on it. I hate to be disappointing, but it's still the same old story, you know, and how long can it go on for? Volumes are decreasing on COMEX. We also see warehouse inventories dropping. So how long can they sort of keep this charade going?
Do you think that the COMEX inventories are draining going back over to the LBMA? And I know from your article, Koos, that, and Jan, I believe that you guys worked on this together, but I'm not sure. But there was the correlation between the LBMA dumping their gold into Switzerland, and then the Switzerland refineries and the imports and the exports all matched, and it was all going into the SGE. I mean, do you see, does that trail actually start at the COMEX, or how does the COMEX play out in that trail?
That was Koos's article, so I'll let Koos comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know about the COMEX because the trade numbers between the United States and the UK doesn't disclose this, but the trail from the UK to China is very clear. The UK net exported more than 1,000 tons of gold this year, and 900 tons of that went to Switzerland. It went out of Switzerland to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong it goes to China to Shanghai, to the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So a lot of it comes from the vaults of GLD, which is an ETF, the biggest ETF, and the rest I assume comes from the LBMA vaults. There's a lot of gold has been stored in the UK in recent years, so that's all being drained. Of course, COMEX inventory is also dropping, but a lot less than what's happening in the UK. And this is really the source of all the Chinese gold that's being sold on the SGE now. It all comes from the UK.
One other question is, Moscow just opened up an exchange also, and do you guys see that playing a role as well? Are they going to be working in conjunction with the Shanghai Gold Exchange? How do you see that whole market playing out?
I'm not aware of any intentions to work with the Shanghai Gold Exchange. I don't know if Koos has heard otherwise, but I think after China, Russia's the second largest gold miner, I think, in the world, and I think again we're just seeing this role being played out for physical demand, and I think there's without question over the next couple of years, perhaps longer, that physical gold is going to start having an impact on the international gold price, and I think Russia want a piece of that. We're already seeing them heavily involved in the other precious metals markets, and I think that the ability to take delivery of this and their small contract sizes, I think they're just following in the SDE's footsteps, and I think again it's this facilitating of gold. I don't know if Koos knows. Do you know, Koos, if they're working with the SGE?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just a shift we can see in a lot of things, gold, but also in pricing power that's going from the west to the east. Exchanges are opening up in the east or, in Russia. It's just a shift in power.
This conversation now reminds me of a USA Today article that we just posted the other day. John Kerry at the APEC, the APEC summit. He was just barely in the picture that was taken, as Vladimir Putin was, of course, front and center. I think it ties into this entire conversation, Koos, in your recent article, Biggest Economic Power Shift in Decades, in which you write, 2013 is the year wherein unprecedented amounts of physical gold are distributed from west to east, a shift in wealth and power not seen in decades. Is this all by design? Because you'd have to believe that the Western powers could control this if they wanted to. Is this all happening by design?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you asked that, because we know for a fact that this is happening. All the gold is going to China, but the reasons why and how it is exactly happening is a bit more of a theory. I think my theory is that China is also engaged in the price manipulation, because there are a number of reasons for this. First of all, as I said before, the only mathematical solution for the United States to come out of this crisis is to devalue the dollar. And China has $3.3 trillion in reserves. So they must be like, yeah, okay, well, fine, but we first would like to have some gold for our dollars before you inflate the hell out of it. So it can be like, you can call it a collaboration or some kind of blackmail thing between them. I think China is involved in manipulating the price, maybe through the billion banks, maybe through the Western market. They lower the price, and then all the gold can be shipped to China. We also saw that mainland net import from Hong Kong jumped in March. In March, it jumped significantly above, I think, 130 tons. And then in April, the price went down and SGE deliveries shot up. So, I think, the imports from Hong Kong were up a lot, and then the SGE vaults were filled, and then the price went down, and the Chinese could buy these huge amounts of physical gold. So I think let's call it a collaboration between the East and the West to distribute all the gold.
Okay, and to devastate the common man, no doubt. Peter, before we throw to you on your question there, Jan, did you have any insight on that question? Is this all happening by design?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Koos has said. And what you said is it's not, surely the West can't be, completely ignorant to what's going on. And there has to be, some kind of ulterior motive. And what Koos was saying about China must be having a hand in this sort of lowering of the gold price. If they're not, then they're having some amazing luck, because it's clearly in their strategy to be buying gold. And look, lo and behold, the gold price gets hammered sort of 2 or 3 times so far this year, in big volumes. So I agree with everything that Koos said.
Peter, fire away.
Yeah, you guys have been talking about how India, China, Russia, the Eastern countries are just accumulating gold hand over fist, but there's been a couple of the countries in the West, like Venezuela with Hugo Chavez when he repatriated his gold, and Germany, how they're trying to get their 674 tons back from the U.S. Are there any other Western countries where gold is flowing into them? I would see that the countries in the West, like Venezuela and Germany, those would be places that are going to come out very well in the next decade, in my opinion, since they are accumulating the metals.
This is a question for Jen, yeah.
In terms of the central banks getting the gold, Venezuela and Germany, Venezuela has obviously already repatriated all of their gold. Germany is trying desperately hard to repatriate their gold. We're also aware of other campaigns happening in Poland and Iceland where they're trying to do it. And also, I don't know if you guys have talked about this already, forgive me if you have on previous shows, the LBMA conference a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you've discussed this, but there were 5 or 6 central bankers there from various Western banks discussing the role that gold plays in central banks' reserves. And it was very telling. None of them had any intention to sell their gold. Salvatore Rossi, who is the head of the central bank in Italy, who, in my opinion, has the hottest name out there, was very, very protective of Italy's reserves, which is interesting given that the World Gold Council have already sort of suggested that maybe they be used as collateral. And then the same as from a guy from the Bundesbank, stood up and said Germany's gold reserves aren't for sale. This is why we're bringing them back. There's now no need to hold all of them abroad. So the guy from France, not the head of the central bank, but my point is that they have taken the time to stand up on the international gold scene and say, hands off our gold, it's not for sale, we're hanging on to this. And these are all, developed, if not, developing countries that are key there. In terms of individuals buying gold, you're certainly not hearing the kind of volumes that we're seeing in China and the developments that we are in Russia. But I think we are possibly seeing some things to be concerned about that shows that people are interested in gold. In France, they've stopped the mail transportation of gold between individuals, which makes you wonder, why are they feeling the need to clamp down on this? Is it because demand is becoming unprecedented? We're still seeing good sales from various mints around the world. And in terms of sort of here at the Real Asset Company, mainly our clients are UK based, and we still see strong demand from them, which has has picked up since April when we sort of first saw the hammering of the gold price. So we are noticing it. I'm not aware of Koos doing any research into the inflows coming into Western countries. But again, just because ETFs have been, losing volume and they've been flowing out of the UK, it doesn't mean that people aren't, sort of still trying to buy gold through means that we're seeing here at the Real Asset Company, where they can buy gold which is stored in vaults outside of the UK. So my answer is that in terms of central banks, I think it's still a really big deal for them, and that's something we need to watch. And like you say, it's particularly key when they are going to be doing very well. And in terms of individuals, in my anecdotal and personal experience, I see that gold is playing an increasing role in people's portfolios.
Let me ask you guys this as it relates to this U.S. government shutdown. I want your perspective on this. But first, let me ask you, are you familiar with the cartoon show, The Simpsons?
Yes.
Sure.
And do you guys know who Mr. Burns is?
Isn't it the clown?
Mr. Burns is the evil controller of all things in Springfield. And I would just want you to think of Mr. Burns and his conniving little fingers and his pointed nose as you think of these criminal banksters that pull the strings over these governments, because I really think that this quote-unquote shutdown that we're seeing in the United States is just playing right into the hands of these banksters. And I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but in the first week of October, Obama met with Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan. He met with Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman and Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan privately at the White House. presumably to talk about this situation. And my understanding is that meeting was in violation of U.S. law. I bring it up because I think this whole thing is a charade. I think that the world can see what's going on, and whether or not this dollar paradigm collapses and the U.S. government collapses anytime soon is anyone's guess. But I think this is the JV scenario. This is the warm-up for what is really coming eventually. What is your guys' take on this government shutdown and this impasse that seems to be happening in Washington?
Yeah, well, of course, it's a charade. It's all theater, you know. I mean, the debt ceiling is a phony crisis. It's just a created crisis by the United States government, and they will resolve it, of course, because there's no reason why they shouldn't. And then after they resolved it, they want us to thank them, you know, because they saved something. It's all theater. It's nothing, and it distracts the attention from the real problems.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you. It's certainly theatre, and to me, it just keeps this kind of, again, this charade going. This sort of, well, it's basically just like a big opera, isn't it? You know, like everyone's just having a good song and dance about what's going on. Everyone's getting very loud and shouty and panicking about what's going on. But ultimately, at the end of the night, it's still the same outcome. It was all just pretend. You know, and it's kind of, it's not. No one's gonna. This isn't going to work out well for anybody, and I just feel that, like you say, it's just kind of a matter of kind of meetings behind doors and who's going to gain the most out of it, whilst the rest of us just sit outside wondering what on earth's going on, and people are suffering for it.
Yeah, it's a high-stakes game of chess. Just on Saturday, it was reported no deal. Quote, on Saturday, a House GOP aide said Mr. Obama had essentially rejected everything offered by House Republican leaders in their proposal, end quote. So even though we saw a 500-point rally in the Dow over a couple of days over the hopium that some agreement would be reached, Rory, what's your take on this?
Well, I just wanted to follow up with that and find out what Koos and Jan, what you guys are hearing from the people that are around you, that are in your life. Is there anybody in Europe, in either of the cities that you live in, discussing what's going on, this circus, this charade, this nightmare being played out?
Well, on two levels. So from my perspective, like working in the gold industry, we get a lot of phone calls from clients who are asking why gold hasn't sort of shot through the roof on the back of this shutdown. Then from a sort of more personal experience, you know, I think sort of people that I talk to day to day, friends and family, are just horrified that Americans aren't out on the streets because they're not being paid. You know, because I think here in the UK we would be having protests. We've seen it in the past. There would be riots going on, and I think people are just a bit confused that this is sort of the most powerful country in the world, and that it just sort of seems to just be used to it. Maybe that is what's happening in the US, but we certainly haven't heard of, you know, anyone getting angry about it. And I think also here in the UK, on the, you know, it's fairly left-wing media here, and they think that Obama's doing the right thing and standing up to the Republicans, particularly when it comes to this whole Obamacare thing. You know, we have a national health service here, and they think that the Republicans are, you know, what's wrong with them? They're effectively evil because they don't want Obamacare to go through. And they think that Obama's just right to kind of just, you know, cut the Republicans off at every single opportunity, because they think that the Republicans are just, you know, they don't understand that you need money to keep a country going. And you know, they kind of, the Brits here just seem to think that if you pump money into an economy, then that's growth. And actually it's not. It's just kind of, it's false growth. It's not real growth. And they don't see that effectively, whilst you're inflating the money supply, we are in a kind of deflationary environment. And so I think Brits generally are just, the media storm that we're seeing here is that they're just confused. Well, they're not confused. They think that Obama's doing the right thing, but at the same time, they're confused why Americans aren't angry that, you know, people that work for the government aren't angry that they're not being paid.
Well, you know, my take on that, Jan, and I would think that you probably know this, Koos, I'd like your take too, is that, and we don't have to get into Obamacare, but I think that the real hang-up is that it was originally over 2,100 pages and nobody read it. It was largely written by insurance companies that would benefit from mandated obligational health insurance, and if you don't buy it, you're going to get a penalty. Getting the IRS involved, of course, to enforce those penalties. And now with amendments and everything else, where my understanding is this thing is over 10,000 pages, which nobody has read. So it's just ripe for fraud, and it's the absolute, in my mind, it's the absolute definition of totalitarianism and authoritarianism, forcing people to buy something with government backing the force, with government providing the force citizens to purchase something from corporations, or in this case, this healthcare exchange. What is your take, Koos, on Obamacare?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's just all in the benefit of the big corporations. I mean, you said 10,000 pages.
Yeah, my understanding is originally it was 2,100 pages, and Nancy Pelosi said that we need to pass it so that we can read what's in it, and now it's over 10,000 pages.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the Patriot Act, which was written in, I guess, 7 days after 9/11, and then pushed through Congress.
Yeah.
Nobody can read it. Nobody can write it. It's just all bullshit. But are people in America aware of this, or is it just a small minority? Because to people in Europe, it's quite obvious what's happening in America. I mean, the political system is just eaten up by the big banks and the corporations. But does the public do anything?
Yeah, I think you are right. I think that people are coming to have come to the awareness that it is corporations which have bought up our government, and you're seeing in the polls an overwhelming amount of Americans reject Obamacare, not want to sign up for it. Only 51,000 applications were successfully filled out. They can't cite anybody who successfully actually signed up and is benefiting from this thing yet. And I think Americans are seeing through it because of the force that's being used to get them to comply. So I think overwhelmingly, I shouldn't say overwhelmingly, but I definitely think from that libertarian and then that conservative right-wing mindset, people are against Obamacare because of what it is forcing on small businesses. Here's another example of why people are mad. The corporations have been given a 1-year waiver, whereas individuals have not been given a waiver. And when pressed on that issue by Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, Kathleen Sebelius said, well, people don't have to sign up. And he said, well, are you giving them a one-year waiver like you gave the corporations? And she said, well, no, but people don't have to sign up. Now, they may get a penalty. They may have to pay a penalty, but they don't have to sign up. So, again, it's government using force. And I can't think of a better example of totalitarianism and this tipping away from liberty than government using the force of the IRS and financial penalties to get you to sign up for something that you may or may not want. And you know who's going to have to bear the brunt of all this, and people who are really against it are surprisingly the young people. You know, because this is a system that's already robbed them of their future, and now this system is saying, and you've got to buy Obamacare, and if you don't want it, we're going to penalize you financially.
Wow.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say a bit like Koos, you know, it's pretty astonishing, and I feel quite relieved that you're saying that people are getting sort of wound up about it and are starting to respond, because I think, again, you know, I think here in the UK we would have seen a reaction to this by now, and I'm kind of relieved that you're saying that, you know, people over there are beginning to sort of take issue with it. I'm just curious though, it was you sort of saying that people are getting upset about the involvement of corporations and banks. Is this just since Obama, or is this been brewing prior to Obama?
I think it's been brewing for a very long time, and the other key example is Monsanto. The way Monsanto has really bought up the government, bought up the FDA. There's a revolving door with their presidents and vice presidents at the FDA. People know it. People are sick and tired of it, and people in this country are waking up. And I do think that there's a tipping point that has been reached. I've long said that this system will collapse. It'll come. The end will come like a thief in the night. It'll take everybody by surprise because it seems to just be able to go on forever. And I think another great example of that tipping point that's been reached is this: the public opinion on the war drums that we're beating to attack Syria. Yeah. Right? Thank God the British Parliament said no. For the first time in hundreds of years, in a couple hundred years, they said no to marching in lockstep with more unconstitutional war, and then this government was obligated to kind of listen to the people, and the polls were 80% of the American people were against this war, no matter what the liar-in-chief was saying, and no matter what John Kerry was saying. People in this country weren't buying it because they did not believe that it was good for them or their children. And I say thank God, because we have not seen that. We did not see that with the Iraq war. We did not see those polls. We did not see those numbers with the Afghanistan war. We did not see those numbers with Libya. But we saw those numbers with Syria, and it took me by surprise, to be honest with you.
Well, that's good. It took you by surprise. Here in the UK, actually, I'd just like to point out that whilst UK Parliament said no, it's actually, you know, the Prime Minister wanted us to go into Syria.
That's right.
It was actually the opposition that, you know, swayed it. So again, I wouldn't say that, you know, yes, great, the parliamentary system worked, but it's still quite concerning that our party that's running the government still wanted us to go into war, and I think that's something that we need to bear in mind in case we have another Iraq type situation. I don't think we're all totally relaxed about how, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iran, or whoever the next one they want to pick on, whoever it's going to be. I don't think we're entirely convinced that Parliament is listening to the public as yet.
I think there's a lot of. I think the U.S. government's crumbling now at the moment. You can see it with the Syria war. They draw a red line, it was a big defeat for the U.S. government. You can see it with the United States dollar. More and more countries, especially the BRICS and the East, are want to trade without the dollar. They're doing swap lines. The People's Bank of China just opened up a swap line with the ECB. You just told me more and more people are getting angry with the United States government. You can really see it crumbling at the moment.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like it's a little bit like the collapse of the Soviet Union. It happened, and it happened quickly. And I agree with you, Koos. I think that people around the world, governments around the world, can see this paper tiger, essentially, is what the United States is now. I mean, we're talking about a country that's threatening to default. Is it Jack Lew, the U.S. Treasurer? He's suggesting that if the debt limit isn't raised and raised soon, the U.S. will default. We're in danger of defaulting. What message does that send the rest of the world?
Well, I don't think the United States is going to default. I mean, why would they? They have a printing press, and this is theater at the moment. So they're not going to default. But it's interesting to think about how is it going to unravel? How is the dollar being pushed out of the world's monetary system, and what's gold's role going to be in this?
Before we let you guys go, Rory or Peter, do either of you have any follow-up questions or any topics we haven't explored yet?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Rory.
I wanted to jump in on the ECB opening up that swap line. That just happened within this past week, and the line is 350 billion yuan for 45 billion euros, and that's what they're gonna. Those are big numbers, and it's supposed to be over the course of 3 years. So this is not going to be something that just is a one-time deal or that kind of situation. And I believe, and Jan, you can help me to understand this better, but I believe that the UK is in the top 10 as far as the largest economies in the world. And are you familiar with them opening up this swap line?
I'm not a swap line expert. I just see a lot of swap lines being opened by the People's Bank of China with other countries. I believe it are now 25 or 30 swap lines in the last couple of years. So it just it emphasizes the defeat of the dollar. I mean, the dollar is going out.
Yeah, it absolutely it epitomizes the collapse of this dollar as the world's reserve currency. It's crumbling right before our eyes. Peter, your question?
Yeah, we were talking about Obamacare and the government shutdown here in the United States and all that stuff, and I'm just curious, what are you guys hearing in Europe about? I mean, a lot of the people that I hang out with are right-leaning, not necessarily libertarian, but at least right-leaning, and they are just ticked about monuments and statues and historical buildings being barricaded by our government.
Peter, you mean during the shutdown, right? What the government is doing, Koos and Jan, if you don't know, is during this government shutdown, they're not allowing people to see the Grand Canyon. They're closing down the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial.
Really?
Yeah, meanwhile, the Pentagon is open for business. So, figure that one out. They're just trying to impose as much pain on the American people as they possibly can. I'm sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because Jan was talking about how most Brits are for Obamacare, but do Brits and Europeans see what Obama is doing to try to inflict, like you said, Sean, as much pain as possible on us? I mean, it's just all silly to me.
Yeah. Well, in Holland, it's kind of like the same as in Britain. People think Obamacare is a good idea. And the news here, and most people are just like the American news, or they believe everything the mainstream media tells them, and only a fraction of the people here, like my friends or other people, are awake and see the charade. But the majority is they're all in the theater.
I don't think people here in the UK have quite made the link between the Obamacare debate and the shutdown. I think they just think that the US government are running out of money, so therefore they've taken some time out so they can all, sit down and fight it out. And then meanwhile there's Obamacare, and Obamacare is good because it means that everyone can have free healthcare, and isn't it terrible that the Americans haven't had free healthcare? Meanwhile, here in the UK we've got people abusing free healthcare on a daily basis. And I think they just don't quite associate. Here in the UK, most of our attractions are free to attend, and so they are shocked that these things are going on in the US. But I don't think that they've quite put two and two together, and that's certainly not how the media are putting it forward. Certainly in the media in the UK, it's because of the big bad evil Republicans that this is happening.
Yeah,
I mean specifically, Obama has closed the Normandy Cemetery over in France. I mean, have you guys heard about that? Is that being reported over in Europe?
No, I haven't picked it up. No.
Yeah.
How would he have the power to close the Normandy Memorial in France?
Because he's Obama.
Who else should close it?
Yeah, I tell you what.
Earlier on when you were sort of saying, the US is losing power, I think that's the main thing, the general feeling. I don't know if Koos is seeing that where he is, but just people are just getting a bit fed up with the US turning up with their big bad boots going, this is how we're going to do things. And actually it's interesting you say that about France, because that hasn't been publicised in the media, and I suspect if that was, then we would maybe have some stronger opinions on what was going on, because we're very, very protective of, those memorial fields. So that's quite interesting, actually. Maybe we'll have to do something on that.
Well, the last thing I'd say about Obamacare, and I know y'all know this, and I know the listeners know that, but I mean, it comes down to this idea of, can a bigger government provide for everybody and make your life better, or can a smaller government where you as a human being have more liberty, is that the better system? And ultimately, it's not free health care. By any means. And then when you find out that it's been written by the corporations to benefit health companies, and to benefit corporations, and to benefit guys like Warren Buffett, and to benefit the oligarchy.
I think in terms of whether or not the government should provide and people looking after one another, here in the City of London, it's quite a different attitude to outside, in other cities, because here particularly in the city, we're seeing this amazing hub going on. It's like sort of an alternative Silicon Valley where people are really trying to kind of get into crowdfunding and peer-to-peer, and particularly peer-to-peer in terms of the banking system, just like leaving the banking system. We shouldn't be relying on these corporations to be looking after our money, just like let's borrow from someone else that's looking to lend money out. So I think there's definitely that kind of this sort of general feeling in that we don't need them, we can do it ourselves, and hopefully that will spread to the rest of the UK. You do see it in other cities as well, sort of people are kind of trying to set up their own currencies, which is interesting. So we have the Bristol pound, which is going on in the city of Bristol. And in terms of Obamacare and this kind of whether how it's being paid for, here in the NHS that we have here in the UK, which is our National Health Service, it's very much seen as a redistribution of wealth. It's a taxation system where you take from one group of people in order to benefit another group of people, and it happens in the same time frame. Whereas a lot of what's happening in terms of quantitative easing, or perhaps you could say to some extent Obamacare, and the general way that the governments are sort of trying to keep the charade going, is you're taking from one group of people now, you're giving to one group of people now, but you're actually taking from people in the future, and those people that you're taking from in the future are the people that can't vote yet, and that's why all of this is going on, and that's why we're not seeing these kind of riots and people kind of thinking, I don't want to get on with it, because they're not the ones that are going to have to pay for this in the long run. Nothing that the government pays for is free. The end of that's the simplest way that people should understand it, but unfortunately they don't, because there's no point of transaction in which it costs the money. Then it's going to take a really long time for people to appreciate that they've been paying for it this entire time.
Yeah, well, the government doesn't produce anything. They can only take from those who do produce. Our guests today have been Jan Skoyles from the Real Asset Company and Koos Jansen from KoosJansenBlogspot.com. What are you working on next? Is there anything we should keep our eyes out for?
Yeah, well, Jan and me are still working on our big China project. It will be, I think we published 2 parts now, and it will be 7 parts. We're going to start working soon and come out with the 5 other parts.
Hopefully the next thing will be on the Shanghai Futures Exchange, but I'm actually slacking off for a week and taking a week off, so it'll be a couple of weeks before you see that.
Okay, so we should keep our eyes open for part 3 of Uncovering China's Rush for Gold.
Yep, keep your eyes peeled.
Okay. Well, again, guys, you can find Koos's work over at koosjansenblogspot.com and visit the Real Asset Company to find Jan's work. Of course, you can find them at SGT Report as well. My thanks to contributors Peter and Rory. Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks to Jan and Koos.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jan and Koos, it was just a real pleasure. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, you guys take care.
You too.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.